Serving Orchard Park, Lackawanna, Cheektowaga,
What's up, everybody? Good morning. Good morning.
We are the legendary Mix 1080 WUFO and Power 96.5.
Buffalo, you know what time it is. It's time for you to get informed and educated on what's going on in the Buffalo public school system with We Are the Parent with my man, Sam Ranford, on the all-new sound of Buffalo. It's Power 96.5 and Mix 1080 WUFO.
Good morning, and I want to welcome you all to We the Parents. I'm super excited, super ecstatic that you chose to join us on this wonderful Saturday morning. I'm your host, I'm Ian Rafford. My father is out this week. He's out, I say vacation, but yeah, he really out doing some work. But you know how that go. You know my long-standing issue with when my dad take off and just throwing me to the wolves. But I'm super excited. We got a very interesting show today. We're going to need a lot of community input, right? I'm going to pose a question at the top of the show, and I just want to get some community input. But before we get into that, this is a call-in show. And the call-in number is 716-837-1112, 716-837-1112. Now, I was going to get on the radio show this morning and be very petty about the fact that the Bills lost last week. But I decided I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go against my better judgment being petty. I want to congratulate the Bills on a wonderful season. It was a wonderful game. No, I am not a fan. No, I do not root for the Buffalo Bills. But, of course, all my family is. I grew up in Buffalo, live in Buffalo. So I'm not going to be petty and make fun of y'all. I'm going to say good game, good season. You guys fought back through adversity. And you played a good game. I mean, the wide right thing is ironic, though. That was an ironic ending. It's funny, I was talking to my dad that morning about how the Bills had got to 4 Super Bowls and lost, and he talked about the wide right of Scott Norwood. So to have a playoff game in a modern day end like that, I've seen somebody put on Twitter that I wasn't alive for wide right, but now I get to share in the experience of what it means to be a Bills fan to have a wide right happen. So, yeah, it's super ironic way to end the game. But again, I thought, Buffalo had a great season, so I'm not going to be petty. At the top of the show, we got Sister Ashara Baker, who should be calling at any moment, who's going to give us our National Parent Union update. She calls in usually the first Saturday or maybe the last Saturday each month to kind of give us an update on what's going on. I want to just briefly, shout out my little brother Elijah, who next Saturday will be his last game of his collegiate basketball career. He's going to be having his senior night. He plays for Villa Maria College, so I just want to shout him out on 4 years of college basketball. He's going to be graduating next year as well. I want to shout him out. I also want to shout out my nephew, Michael Gibson, who is the starting forward for Bishop Timon, who took a hard loss last night to Canisius, but he's been having a good season, and Timon's been having a good season. So I want to shout out my nephew, Michael Gibson, as well. I'm always proud when I can get on a radio show and shout out my family because, the Rapper family is huge. It's a big family. So, there's always something being done. So I'm super proud of my little brother who, while playing college basketball, became a father, still maintained, going to school, having good grades. I think he had like a 3.2 or something like that. So he one of the highest grade point average on his team. I want to shout out my nephew Mike as well, who's doing an amazing job in school and also starting for one of the top teams in the city. So shout out to them too. We encourage y'all to keep going. We love you all. Is that a shower on? Okay, and so now we're gonna pivot really quickly to our National Parent Union update from Sister Ashara Big. How you doing this morning, Sister Ashara?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm blessed. I can't complain at all.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I just wanted to, I know I normally come on at the beginning of the month. This is a really quick invitation and celebration that I wanted to share with the Buffalo community this morning. I'm going to be posting it directly on the We the Parents Show Facebook page right now. But for everyone who's aware, right now we are in the legislative session of the state of New York. Yes, so there are a lot of stakeholders meeting with the governor's office in regards to the budget that impacts all of our lives, whether it's through housing, it's through childcare, education, you name any intersection within the state budget, that is what assembly members and senators and community members are meeting about for the next 6 months. So there is a hearing February 1st that would take place around education, anything that impacts students K through 12 as well as and higher education as well. So this hearing it's pretty important, but unfortunately it's very hard for individual parents and caregivers to be in this space and have the opportunity to really address some of the issues that are impacting their communities. I got tired of trying to get to so many tables that I just said, you know what, we're about to build our own this year. So I'm formally inviting the Buffalo community, any parent, grandparent, educator, advocate, organization who wants to be involved in this. This is for you. It is taking place Wednesday, January 31st at 6 p.m. It's called the People's Hearing. And this hearing is simply a space for us to elevate our testimony and our voice. What we are doing on behalf of the National Parents Union New York is we are sharing these individual testimonies with the Education Committee of the state, as well as those who deal with education within the governor's office. So your testimony will not go in vain. It's not just going to, happen on a Zoom call. We are going to ensure that your voice and your advocacy is elevated on the state level directly with those who impact our children. So this is my invitation to you all.
No, I'm sorry. I feel like you got cut off. You there, Sister Shower?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you hear anything?
Yeah, I hear you now. I'm sorry, just like it was abrupt. Was that the end? I apologize. It was like you were talking and it just abrupt. I didn't know if that cut out or not.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, you good though. If you have more, you good. You can keep going. I hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's simply, today is just a simple invitation. I'm just inviting any stakeholder in the Buffalo community to the People's Hearing. It's going to be held on Wednesday, January 31st. I just posted the information on the We the Parents radio show Facebook page, so you can see it on there. There is a Google form. You simply click on the form and put your information. If you want to submit written testimony, you can put that testimony in there. If you just want to join the call, you can join the call and share on other advocates, or if you want to join the call and speak, you also have that option. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sister Shire. We appreciate all the updates you give us. And Sister Shire, you work hard. I just want to give you work hard and you hard working, and we appreciate all the work you do on behalf of parents in New York State. And please make sure you give us that flyer. And you sent it to me last night. I'll make sure, I'll send that around and make sure we post that on We the Parents Facebook page. But we appreciate all the hard work you do and keeping us informed and really advocating on behalf of parents across the state. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's personal. I have a baby in this system.
Amen.
So I have to work hard on this one. But as always, it's a pleasure. I thank you so much for letting me join you this morning. And I look forward to sharing more national and statewide updates in the February segment.
All right. Thank you, Sister Shire. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next month.
All right. Thank you.
All right. We've also been joined. It's so funny when Joe walk in with his puffy jacket on, with his big winter coat. We've been joined by the attorney, Joe Moore. How you doing this morning, Joe?
Doing well, man. How are you this morning?
I'm good. It's warming up, right? It's not too cold out there, right?
It's not too cold. It's still winter though. Again, that's how you know I'm old. So I'm like, oh, you got to keep your winter coat on.
Yeah, Joe has officially reached the elder age, so we definitely appreciate Joe. So I want to talk about something today, and again, this is a call. We want the community to call. We want to hear your input on this. Calling number is 716-837-1112. I want to talk about community standard, right? Like the idea of having a community standard. And the question I want to pose to the listening audience, and me and Joe are going to get into it now, was do you believe that our community's lack of standard is the reason why our community looks the way it does. And so when I talk about lack of standard, I'm talking about lack of standard in education, lack of standard in our elected officials, lack of standard in our own homes. Just the idea that we don't expect or have a standard for which people should deal with us, should represent us, should be around us. And because of that lack of standard, it feels like our community always takes what is given. I'll juxtapose that with a community like we've seen in Williamsville, where a couple of years ago, they wanted their children to come back into school. And because they wanted their children to come back to school and the superintendent who was in the seat didn't, that community rallied. They did everything they could, and that superintendent ended up let go because that community standard was if we asked the school system of something to do, we expect it to be done because that's the standard in which this community operates. So again, I want to just throw that question out there. Does our community, I'm saying Black Buffalo, does our community's lack of standards really show up in how our community looks and how our community is represented? And I'll throw that question to you first, Joe. What do you think about that?
So I think that to get into this and requires kind of some foundation.
Yeah, for sure.
And you just gave one piece of the initial foundation, which is how do we define community? And we talked a little bit about this yesterday evening. In this particular analysis, we're looking at Black Buffalo, right? So we're looking at the confines of Buffalo. We're looking at kind of a geographic space and an ethnicity. But the word community really kind of is a fluid concept, right? Sometimes when we say community, we're talking about Black Buffalo. Sometimes we're talking about all of Buffalo. Sometimes we're talking about Western New York. And so the geography and sometimes the group we're talking about kind of influences what community we're talking about. For the purpose of this conversation, we're talking about that. Having said that, there's several different areas we could be talking about. We can talk about education, we can talk about voting, we can talk about economic empowerment, et cetera, et cetera. And I think to do a proper analysis of it, we have to kind of choose what box. And it's not that we can't do multiple boxes, but we need to choose which box we're talking about first, and then dig into that because the standards for one box may be different than the standards for another.
And so I'll tell you what I want to start in the box of our community's representation, our elected officials, okay, right? And I want to start in that box. I was having a conversation with a group of my friends this week, and they were talking about really. We were talking about the presidential election, but they were really talking about how when you look at who we have to choose between in our presidential election, it really just represents two options that we're really not comfortable with, two options that we feel are just like, whatever. But we really boiled that down to really, we don't have standard for who we put to elect us, right? When people come and say we want to represent you, they show up, they give us a story, and whoever we like more, we put in that seat. And we it's not a real standard. There's no real boxes we check. There's no real hurdles people got to jump over to make sure that when they get in those seats, they represent us and we hold them to a standard. So let's start there. I definitely want to get into the education, and I definitely want to get into at home. But let's start with our elected officials, our representation. Do you think that we suffer from a lack of standard in who we put in those seats?
So it's interesting, and I was actually talking to a friend from Long Island about that this week. When we talk about elected officials, there are at least two ways that we really get our elected officials. The pool of individuals who are our senators, our assemblymen, our presidents of the United States, our governors, etc. One way, and I think it's the ideal way, is that the community looks among itself and it offers up an individual to represent it, right? This individual, whoever's been selected, presumably has a community values installed. He or she has a way about them, how they carry themselves, how they communicate, what they're sensitive to, and all of that's built in when the community offers an individual up for leadership. The other way is that, in this country in particular, but I imagine it's similar in other places, your political parties offer up individuals for you to choose. And I think the second kind of method is much more prevalent, as opposed to the community saying, here's who we want to lead. The political parties are saying, here are your options to choose from to be a leader. And I think when that happens, you look out, you see a couple different things. You see maybe a disinterest oftentimes, and I think that's where we are now, in the political process, because you're saying, well, everyone I have to choose from, I don't connect with. I don't vibe with. I don't feel that they represent me, particularly when we're looking at our presidential landscape right now. We've got two older gentlemen, 177, 181, I believe. And you've got a young group saying, they're so far removed from my experience that I can't relate to them. I can't connect to them. And so I'm just kind of tapping out here, right? I'm not particularly vested in this. And so when we get into standards, I think there in this box, there is a lack of standard, because the standards that disconnect is young people stepping back, a lot of people in general stepping back, is ultimately saying whatever standards I have as a group, you aren't meeting them. I may not have identified specifically what I like and don't like, but what I can tell you is what you offered me, I don't like. So that standard is not being met. It's not. I would not say we have a lack of standards necessarily in that scenario for president. I would say whatever our standards are, the political group has ignored them.
Yeah, I think for me, what it really comes down to is this idea that sometimes in our community it feels like powers that be feel like they know better for us than us, right? And so, like you said, when you go into that pot and you say, I'm going to give you the options to choose from. These are the people in which are qualified, which, we've vetted, we've went through, we've done this, we've done that. So choose from these options. Like you said, what happens when that occurs is the lack of interest in participating in something that already where it feels dictated to you, right? I think a lot of young people, when you talk to them about whether they're going to vote or not, the thing I always hear is that whether I vote or not, the person who's going to win anyway, right? The person who the Democratic Party chose going to win anyway. My vote don't matter. And so what we've seen is we see groups always come out during election time. We got to get more people to vote. We got to get people more active to vote. But every time they get to that space, they're like, why would I vote when it feels like you're already telling me who's going to win? You're telling me who to vote for. You're telling me who's going to win. You're telling me how I should view it, what I should do. And so I think that the concept for a lack of standard for me is that we don't ever push back against that. We don't ever come and say, yo, we're not just taking who you give us. We're going to put up what we want to put up.
So it's really interesting. Now, by tradition on the Democratic side, again, I'll go back to the presidential race. If there's an incumbent, the incumbent is normally a person you back, right? And that's what you see here. So there's not really a lot of controversy on the Democratic side. Right. There are some minor candidates that have put their name into the hat, so to speak, but I couldn't even name them because it's basically Biden. But it's really interesting on the Republican side, what you're seeing now. So you're down to two folks, right? You're down to Trump and Haley. And Haley is really that person pushing against the machine. And so after losing New Hampshire, despite getting 40-some-odd% for Haley the other day, the Republican national leadership comes out, and there's actually like the group responsible for kind of overseeing all the Republicans and making sure money's distributed and trying to get their folks in office. There's a woman who's in charge of that. She comes out and she says, basically Trump is the de facto leader of the Republican Party. Nikki Haley should sit down. And you've seen all sorts of actual elected officials do that. So New Hampshire's Governor Sununu, comes out and he says, who supports Nikki Haley, he says, well, listen, you've only had 2 states weigh in. You got 50 states, and you've had 2 states, not to mention you've had 2 of the smallest states weigh in. There are all these other Republicans out there who might have an opinion contrary to what Iowa and New Hampshire concluded. And he makes a great point, right? But there's, again, there's an example of the political party coming in and telling you, this is what we're going to do. This is what we should be doing.
Right.
And that, to my mind, is the exact opposite of what should be happening.
Exactly.
If we have a vote, and not just a vote, really, collectively, we have all the votes, right? It's our responsibility, it's at least within our power, I should say, to go in there and to say, this is who we want.
This is who we
But
want.
when we're disengaged, that allows the political parties to say, this is who you can choose from. or this is who you're choosing. This is where we're going. And I think it's evident for the Republicans right now, and I'm sure, you know, the shoe has been on the other foot for Democrats in the past at some point, that they're just being told, this is what we're doing.
This is what it is. Yeah.
In the midst of, by the way, an $83 million settlement.
That just came.
Not settlement, I should say, but verdict against Trump yesterday.
I
digress.
Yeah, and I got a bunch of opinions, but Lee, you want to weigh in?
I just got a question.
Yes, sir.
I've never paid attention to the primaries before. The total population of New Hampshire and Iowa combined is only 4 million people.
Yeah.
So why are they so important?
You know,
I'm about to say you'll do the more politically correct answer. Go ahead, Joe.
So I don't know in depth, but I do know that historically, I think going back to Ford somewhere, maybe in there. I hope I'm not wrong. There may be some historians who are listening who could straighten me out there. But going back to Ford, there was some preference toward Iowa, and they stuck with it.
Yeah.
And the answer to the question is, this is the way we do it because this is the way we've done it.
This is all we've done. That's it. Yeah.
Which has always struck me as very odd because Iowa and New Hampshire in the last couple of years, at least on the Democratic side, there's been pushback, and technically the first Democratic primary is going to be South Carolina. There was pushback from New Hampshire. Iowa kind of bowed out respectfully. But the reason why there was so much pushback in New Hampshire was that they know that the initial momentum that you get in these elections, during primary season, often does influence how these things unfold. But the problem is, Iowa, not only is Iowa and New Hampshire combined such a, you know, America's 330 some odd million people, 4 million people is not, you know, a large chunk, but they're also not a representative group. Exactly. Both Iowa and New Hampshire are very unique communities, but I don't know that the experiences of an Iowan or someone from New Hampshire is indicative of your typical experience. What makes sense is Texas is first. What makes sense is California is first. What makes sense is Florida or New York. Yeah. These huge states with all these people who can really give you an initial push to say
more diversity. Yeah.
This is what we want, and then again, that's the party that's the people leading, right? That's the people saying, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a whatever. This is who I want. But what you see in these smaller states is the party being able to control more so, I think. Yeah. What you get.
And it's really just a small state trying to maintain its relevance in the political landscape over years, because they know that as this thing gets deeper, their opinion means less and less, right? When you start getting into primaries, you start getting into New York's, the Texases, the Californias, Iowa, New Hampshire is not. You're not even considering how they feel, what they think. So small states get a little bit of relevance, get a little bit of power, and they fight tooth and nail to keep it over years. But you know. It don't really, you know, it don't. In the grand scheme of it, it doesn't really mean that much. But we do have a caller hanging on. Caller, are you there?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
I also want to add to it's not just the results. First of all, thank you for bringing up what you tried to do to Nikki. Okay, and I'm a Democrat. Okay, I don't always vote Democrat. Okay, just keep that real. But here's my thing. The vote, the power of the vote, okay, they are so desperate, and I say they, anybody who's trying to put Trump back into office, okay, to control the narrative again, okay. You know, you got all these things going on with his courts and, you know, court cases, okay, and the Constitution, whether or not he should be on ballots, okay. They're just ignoring the obvious, okay? So the fact that not only Republicans, they tried to silence their voice, but independents as well, okay? A woman is out there, okay, challenging him. How dare she, okay? And they are trying, men, okay? They've already reversed Roe versus Wade, trying to control our bodies. We're seeing the same things again, okay? Where women had to fight for rights, okay, to vote. Now they're trying to silence this white woman. Well, yeah, I guess she's not white, but whatever. Okay, a female. vote. Yeah, I'm over it, okay? They took the nerve, okay? That's all I'm going to say. Bye.
Yeah, and I'll say this. When you turn your political landscape over to a two-party system, this is what happens, right? When you turn our political landscape, it mostly revolves around a two-party system where from the federal government down to local government, whatever community you go in, you look around and you say, what political group is controlling this space? Is it Democrat? Is it Republican? And that's long been the answer. And so, interesting enough to layer this conversation, when you look at our political landscape, our community really doesn't have the opportunity to set standards because, especially in Buffalo's community, the Democratic Party tells us what our standards are. These are your standards. This is who you're going to vote for. This is how we're going to elect who we vote for. And so what's happened is over years and years and years, people don't come into our community trying to win us over. If you win a Democratic nomination, that's long been a stamp of I'm going to win no matter what it is. And so they've watered down our standard. They've took our idea of having a standard for who we elect away and said, listen to us, we got it for you.
And it's interesting, quite honestly, and I'll pick on, the immediate radio station a little bit. When we get to election time, we'll walk in here and we'll see all of the politicians.
Everybody.
We'll see, there'll just be this one Saturday or there's 2 Saturdays where we see all of the politicians here. And, they're very much in campaign mode. And then that ends, and then we only see our black politicians that come through here, right? Mm-hmm. We don't really see the rest of the politicians for another political cycle. But to get squarely back to, because I was talking about, the presidential election and national, I agree completely with you on the local level. If we're asking about electoral standards in Buffalo, New York, I agree with you that we don't have them, but I come to that conclusion for a different reason, although I agree with everything you said. I come to that conclusion because we don't vote.
Yeah.
So if we don't vote...
That's a true statement, man.
We can't exercise a standard. So by definition, if we're literally not engaging the process, we can't suggest that we have a standard. So because of that, I would say... in the electoral pot, particularly for black folks. Now the voting population of Buffalo in general might be, 20% in an election. Now, I don't know what the breakdown is racially, but you asked about black Buffalo. Mm-hmm. And I suspect that number is that much smaller if we were to isolate black Buffalo. And so, again, reinforcing kind of what I just said, I don't think that we exercise much of a standard as a community at all. But
for me, that feels like purposeful, like that was done to us, right? Because when you look at it, the powers that be benefit from small voting numbers because they know they can get their people out to vote, mm-hmm. right? They're not pushing for a diversity in the vote because they know the more people that come out to vote, the more chance they have to lose because you don't know who nobody's going to vote for. And so it's interestingly enough, like, as generations have come, my generation, the 20, the 30 and under, you see a large majority of them have no interest in voting, right? A lot of my friends, like people who I went to school with, people who I talk to, they don't vote. They don't vote in local races. They don't vote in national races because all they've been told over a generation is that it don't matter what your vote is because we're going to tell you who's going to win anyway. So when you have that happen in the community over years, by the time a generation comes to the age where they can vote, and they've been told for so long that their vote doesn't matter, you're not going to get them interested in voting. And it's interesting because in our community, like you said, we see we push people to vote, but sometimes it feels jaded. It feels like you don't really want people to vote because I encourage all my friends to go vote. But how do I answer a question when they say, well, if I vote and the person who they told me going to win anyway, why would I care to go vote?
So I'm going to respectfully disagree with you a bit on that, and I'll explain why. The purpose of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or whatever party is not to encourage voting. The purpose is to win. The sole purpose is to get the candidate
That's
or
a bar.
candidates
That's a bar.
that they want in. So, given that goal, what they have to do is they have to look at the lay of the land and say, what is the best way to accomplish that task? Now, here, they may have concluded that the best way to accomplish that is to have people not participate. But again, that's a strategic conclusion that a political party has reached in order to achieve a particular goal. When you talk about something having been done to us, I would not say that it's been done to us. I'd say certainly we've been conditioned in a way, but here's what we've got. We've got early voting. We've got weeks of early voting at this point.
No question.
Here's what we got. No one's being turned away from the poll. Nope. Certainly not in a massive way.
Not here, no.
And so with those two in place, your ability to vote has not been infringed upon.
Agreed.
Currently, in a way that prevents you from participating. Conversely, you've opted not to participate. As a group, we've opted not to engage the system. And we always say on this show, and we continue to say, because it's just the truth, you know, if you're not at the table, right, you're on the menu, right? We've permitted ourselves to be on the menu, but that's a choice. Even though that may be what the political parties want, it's still a choice by us, as opposed to an ability that's been taken away from us that we can't now exercise.
I agree it's a choice, right? I guess my thing is although it is in a way where you've, like you said, you've conditioned a group of people not to participate in the masses in a way that other groups are not conditioned that way. And again, I always default to this. You have the ability to go do it. It's on you to go do it. Like, I can't give you a cop-out. If you got to go vote, like, go vote. But again, everybody doesn't have the wherewithal to understand that the conditioning has taken place, and sometimes because you don't understand it's taken place, you participate in it. And I think shows like this and conversations like this aim to wake people up to the thought that nothing is infringing on your right to go vote. Even if a person's told you your vote doesn't matter, even if a person told you somebody's going to win, it's not infringing on it. That's just another person's opinion, and their opinion shouldn't matter more than your opinion. And so you still have the ability to make a decision about what you're going to do, and you don't have to kowtow to a Democratic Party, a Republican Party, or anybody for that matter in a decision you get to make for yourself.
So I want to say, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, but we as a community have to ask ourselves, and really as a nation we have to ask ourselves this question. Whose responsibility is it to encourage voting in the first place?
It's a good question.
Because I'll tell you whose responsibility it's not. It's not really the responsibility of the political parties. And I think we've left it to them to say, do all the things as political parties that are healthy for democracy. Again, we misunderstand the purpose of a political party. The purpose of a political party is to win. So if they have a definitive bias going in, and they're telling you we're not going to show any fidelity or a limited amount of fidelity to democracy in the interest of winning, then whose responsibility does it fall on to promote voting? And I think that comes back to the community. It has to, or else it doesn't get done. But if our expectation is that the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the Independent Party, or the Green Party, or whatever party comes out and says, I encourage you to vote, even if it's at the expense of my candidate losing, that ain't happening. That's not a realistic expectation on any political party, because that is not their goal. Again, their goal is to win.
I think, and we got a call hanging on, I think the point you hit on is a point that we see throughout all of our community, where we put expectations on things to do things other than what they're designed to do. Right? You can't put an expectation on a political party to encourage something when their sole job is to win. That's the only reason they're in existence, is to win. I mean, what else would they be doing? But we have a caller. Going to call. Are you there?
Yes. Good morning, gentlemen.
Hey, Dr. Doyle.
Good morning, Dr. Doyle.
Yes. Good morning to you. I would like to announce that my column, Eye on History, will be published in the Buffalo News every Sunday in February.
Wow.
Black History Month.
Oh, wow.
And this is the 15th year.
Amazing.
That the news will have published my articles on Black history. And in your discussion of standards and community, the the people I'm going to write about each Sunday were people who had standards politically, educationally, and they did it at a time in the 1800s and the early 1900s when it was not really, blacks were not really free, but they did it. Mm-hmm. And I'm writing about them because they pose examples for us today. And I want to end by saying, if you miss the articles, you can access them on the Buffalo News archives. They will be there for the rest of the year. So I thank the Buffalo News editors for giving me this opportunity, and I want to share with you that I write about some really deep black history. They have never, in 15 years, changed my content. So I appreciate the opportunity, and my column, gentlemen, will be officially 45 years old in February. I'm a senior citizen, and I'm still writing, and I thank the Lord for this opportunity. I just wanted to share that.
Amen.
You gentlemen will have a good day.
You have a great day too, Dr. Doyle. Thank you
for all your contributions.
Yeah, for being a beacon, of hope, a beacon of expectation, and showing us what we can accomplish. Like, again, I always tell a famous story that Dr. Doyle got me in trouble in 7th grade because I took my 7th grade history teacher the story of Crispus Attucks and said he was the first person to die in the Revolutionary War, and my teacher told me I was wrong. And so I said, well, Doctor, Miss Doyle told me, and she gave her the research, and lo and behold, we watched the movie about the Revolutionary War, and Crispus Attucks pops up in the movie, and he looks at me, he's like, I apologize, I was wrong. And so, Dr. Doyle has been an example in our community for a long time, and we appreciate all the work you do.
So, I want to say, and some people, and we really haven't gotten into this, but some people may be like, all right, so really at the end of the day, what is a standard, right? What is a standard? And so I want to put this out there as an example. So I grabbed my son last night, and his mother and I went over his report card, right? And so it was him, his mother, and I, and she's got all this paperwork, and they've got all this stuff digital now, so we're going through the stuff, and we're looking at the various grades. But not only do they give you the various grades, kudos to them, they actually break down, they'll give you each assignment, kind of, what is going on. So when stuff pops up, I'm like, all right, well, what is this? This grade is good, yada, yada, yada. What's going on with this grade? And his mother might say the same thing. But when that happens, that's setting standards. Right? That's what setting standards looks like. All right, we got this A in math. That's wonderful, right? We're doing good. What is this C? Where did this C come from? Why didn't you hand in this assignment, right? What happened? It says you lost a document. Why did you lose a document, right? What methodologies are you now implementing to prevent yourself from that? And that is, at a rudimentary level, but on a day-to-day kind of thing, that this is standard setting so that the person, you're interacting with, the subject matter, in this case is my son, understanding their standards and their expectations to be met.
Yeah, and I thank you for pushing that conversation forward, because even if we look at the standards we have of our educational system, right? I think a lot of times we don't understand that. For me, and this is just strictly my opinion, and this is we the parents, so we're gonna have a robust conversation about it. For me, standards for me started at home. Right? My parents set a clear standard for how I was to conduct myself in school, how I was to apply myself in school, what workout. They set the standard, and when I got to the school enhanced that standard because the teachers would say, we expect da. But that was a partnership. It was a partnership in setting the standard for a student to say, we expect you to be this, that, and that. And sometimes what we see is that you cannot solely expect the school to set a standard for your child. Absolutely. You cannot solely depend on the education system because, again, the variable that you have in the education system is that every teacher in the education system is not a good teacher. Every school is not a good school. Every it's just too much variable that goes into that. And also, it's not just solely on the parent to set a standard for education, because a parent sets the standard and it sends a child to a space in order to enact that standard. So again, it's a partnership that has to take place. And if either or is out of balance, I feel like we get what we get a lot today, where we have the educational system pointing fingers at the parent, saying parents do better in sending us a better student. And we have this parents point at the school system saying, well, the school system isn't providing my child with the education needed to uphold my standard. And so we have a bunch of finger pointing, a bunch of blaming others, when in reality, it truly is a partnership when you look at, a standard for a child being able to get a quality education.
So there was The Daily, which is a podcast from the New York Times, and in the last maybe month or two it came out. And what they were talking about is SATs, ACTs. And if you all have been paying attention over the last few years, we've gotten away from the use of them, and a lot of colleges have basically done away with them. MIT, which is one of our, if not our top tech university in the nation, comes out and they say, you know what, we're going back to the ACT, SAT. And they explain why. So in the midst of the Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action, which makes it potentially more complicated to get diversity, they're saying, so now we need to go out. We don't have this ACT, SAT, and we need to identify a diverse group, which could be, women to men. It could be different minority groups. It could be however you define diversity, right? But what we're having trouble doing as a university is identifying star students that will do well when they get here. And as they dug deeper into it, they explained, you get all these schools and all these transcripts, really, and most of the kids applying to MIT, A's, right? And MIT comes out and they say, all right, but how do I differentiate an A in Buffalo from an A in Amherst, if there's a difference at all? And what they talked about, and there's a new kind of concept to me, but we touched on it in the last couple of months, we just didn't kind of name it, this notion of grade inflation.
That's real.
And
it's real.
For those who aren't familiar, it's this idea that schools have kind of gotten into giving students A's because it looks good on paper. The parent feels good, the students feel good, but there's no substance behind it.
Yep.
And this is exactly the space that we've been in when we talked about some of our valedictorians going off to schools and finding that despite the fact they're valedictorian, salutatorian from a particular school, they get to college and what they're supposed to know, the capabilities, et cetera, are not up to par, right? And part of that is because they've been getting A's, but they've been getting A's at a school, at a teaching environment that is still not as rigorous as somebody else's. And so MIT comes back and says, I can't trust this 4.0 versus this 4.0 grades because it means nothing. I need a neutral test so that I can put everybody on the same playing field and see where you are.
Measure up.
And we had one of those. It was the ACT/SAT. And not that those may not be problematic in and of themselves, but I take their point. How are we gauging that? Now, going back to standards, this is, again, why we have statewide tests as well. And again, there are issues with those. But I'm at the point where you can't trust the grades that your child is getting.
Yeah.
I would be skeptical if my child brings home A's and B's.
All the time.
But I know that my Buffalo Public Schools or Amherst Public Schools or Williamsville Public Schools, whatever system it's in, right, is it underperforming or kind of lackluster system by and large? I'm skeptical of those A's and B's because I'm not sure that they mean the same thing that they used to mean 30 years ago when I was in school.
And this is why it's important to have partnership in education with a parent, because if my child's bringing home A's and B's saying they're a fluent reader, okay, read this book. Let me see you read the book.
Yeah.
Read the book. And not only are you going to read it, tell me what you comprehend from it. Give me a book report on it. Let me read your essay. Because again, I will never just trust a school system to tell me my child is educated. And that is again, that's a standard that comes from my parent, but comes from the idea that, like Joe said, I went to a Buffalo school my whole life. And the thing they always told us is that an A at City Honors is like an A++ at Burgard, right? And they saying an A at Burgard is a C+ at City Honors. That was always the thing they said, because again, when you start looking at college and you start looking at how rigorous is the education you're getting, and if I look at the rigor of the education you're getting compared to another one, and I'm like, well, they both got A's, but those are not equal A's. This A on this side is a little bit different because of the institution, because of where they go, because of a lot of different things than this A. And Tamisha, she revealed that too. She was the valedictorian at Burgard. And she went to Binghamton and she said, I knew nothing. This is the best Burgard I had to offer. And she went to Binghamton. And I'm not throwing down on Binghamton, but it's not Harvard, it's not Howard. It's Binghamton. And so, again, but we got two calls hanging on, right? Carlos, we have you hanging on. Carla, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead, Carla.
Listen, that A in Amherst and that A of Buffalo is called coding. Because when they see that A from Amherst, they know what that code is and they know where it's coming from. They see that A of Buffalo and they got that code, they know where that A is coming from. It's been in that system for I don't know how long. So you're absolutely right. An A in Buffalo is different from an A in Amherst.
Thank you, caller. We appreciate you. You chimed in on that. We got another caller hanging on. Caller, are you there?
Yes. This is Mr. Doyle again.
Hey, Dr. Doyle.
I want to ask you, gentlemen, a question. As young people, if you could name someone, who would you like to see run for president as young people? And so I'm anxious to know and your reasons for your choice. I'm hang up and listen to your answer.
That's an interesting question.
So for me, first off, thank you, Dr. Doyle, for asking that question. For me, I've long been a Cory Booker fan. I feel like I think a couple years back when Cory was running, when it was Joe. When Joe Biden ended up getting the nomination, I long thought, I said, Cory just needs a little bit more seasoning, a couple more years of seasoning, and I think he'll be ready. I think Cory represents, what I feel like, he aligns with my politics more than anybody else in the Democratic Party. So for me, I've long been a Cory Booker fan, and I've always hoped he ran for president and on the Democratic Party put him up to be president. So Cory's been my pick for a while.
So, I don't know that I have a definitive answer. I think Cory Booker would be on that list. I think we do see some senators out there, and maybe a handful of governors, that to me present themselves well. They think outside of the box. I've heard, not that I necessarily agree with all his politics. I thought the governor of Utah actually presented pretty well, which kind of caught me off guard. But, when he was doing something. And I think the former governor of Maryland, the last guy, did well. But then we've got a brand new African-American. Happens to be a member of Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And so he's not I won't call him an up-and-coming star, because when you're the governor of a large state, you're a star.
You made it.
Right? So we've got these individuals who are in there, and I want to hear more from them. Even if you looked in the middle of COVID, we had the mayor of D.C., we had the mayor of San Francisco, we had the mayor of Atlanta. We have some politicians out there who presented themselves well, but it's almost like they're eclipsed. It's almost like there are these steps that they have to take before being considered. So I would really like to see some of that, not even that field developed. I'd like to see more exposure to that field to determine who I think would be a strong candidate. But I do think that there's some talented folks out there, many of whom I probably don't even know exist at this point.
Can I throw a name out there? I know people might not like this, but I thought before he got into his trouble in New York City, I thought Cuomo was on the short list of people who could possibly become president. I thought Cuomo presented himself well. I thought he handled the pandemic well. He got himself in trouble with obviously what he did, and I'm not by no way saying that he wasn't. I'm not getting into that. I'm saying as a candidate, I thought for a while that Cuomo was anchoring and you know, putting himself in a position to be on that short list of people who ran against Trump. But obviously he got into trouble. But yeah, you know, I would have voted for Cuomo. I'll just be honest with you. I liked Andrew Cuomo. I thought he was good. But you know, I think in asking that question, it really represents the problem, and especially on both sides, right? Because if you look on the Republican side, everybody thought DeSantis was it. He's the young guy. They basically called him Young Trump. He's the young Trump. And when you get to a place where the party has to lean on a 77-year-old and an 81-year-old to represent the interests of the party, therein lies the problem with a two-party system where you telling us that our best representation is 81-year-old Joe Biden or 77-year-old Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. For me, those are bigger issues that we have when we look at what our presidential race is shaping up to be. Yeah. Like, way bigger issues, and I think we have to do. If we're going to depend on both parties, they have to do a better job of bringing us more viable candidates. Because I don't know about you, Joe. You know, I think Joe Biden has returned the presidency to a sense of normalcy. I'll say that. But his age is a huge hurdle for me. And I don't want to sound like he's 81 years old. I just don't think at that age you should be in office. I think you should be enjoying your life. Those are your golden years. You I don't know if I'm comfortable with an 81-year-old being president.
Well, here's my thing, and you can get into this at different ages. And I even noticed this again kind of in my 40s. Different people wear age in different ways.
Absolutely. That is a fact.
So I've got peers who are also in their 40s, but the way they present isn't always like, you know, some people present in their 40s like life has been rough. They're rough 40-some-odd years. Mm-hmm. And some people present in their 40s like, you know, this thing is working out okay. You know what I mean? I'm healthy.
Look good, feel good.
Yeah, and I think even though those 70s and those 80s are pushing it in terms of being probably in the political eye on such a large stage, part of Joe Biden's problem is that he's not a vigorous 81.
No.
And to his credit, there's not many vigorous 81-year-olds.
No, it is not.
I don't know an abundance of vigorous 81-year-olds. However, were he a vigorous 81-year-old, I think that people might look at it a bit differently. He'd still be an older gentleman. There's no question about it. But I think part of what people are responding to is not just his age, but also
how he carries it.
And I think that's been a crutch.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say that in choosing who I think would be a good candidate for president, one of the things that I value, and this is just a function of my experience, I value how someone presents themselves, how articulate they are. I value their education. I value some of their experiences. Mm-hmm. I know for sure that there are millions of Americans that don't value those things because, quite honestly, that's not a pull for Trump, right?
No, it's not.
Some Americans, and they have every right to feel how they feel, but some Americans value bravado. Some Americans value, swag, charisma. Mm-hmm. And those things have their place, but that is not persuasive to me.
I agree.
So when I list my candidates, they may not come off, the way that some Americans would find persuasive to be a leader.
Yeah, and we got a caller hanging on. Caller, can you go quickly? We got about 3 or 4 minutes left.
Okay, yes. I just want to say thank God for Dr. Doyle. She is amazing.
Amen.
And I just want to say kudos to her. She has a display, and along with Constance Eve and Clifford Bell, at the public library. Say their name. Okay, now, I wanted to say that I would vote for Liz Cheney and Michelle Obama. And, these are people that I believe that can bring the nation together. And have we ever seen a Republican and a Democrat as a president and vice president? Okay, that might help us too. Okay, fine.
So I can answer this one. I'm super excited to be able to answer this one. And the answer, I believe, and again, I hope historians don't call back and chastise me. The answer is yes. So going back into 1700s and 1800s, the losing party actually took over the vice presidency.
Yep.
So there has been frequently in early American history, there has been someone who was a president who was of one party and someone who was vice president of another party. I don't know at what point in history
it shifted. Yeah,
it shifted, and they were just like, "Yeah, we're not giving it to you."
Yeah,
but early on, that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, George Washington, John Adams, that was the standard.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Having said that, the vice president would have had absolutely no power. It was
zero.
Just, basically a crown. A crown of you've been defeated, but it did, on paper, exist that way.
Yeah, we got a couple of stuff. I'll say this. But the name Michelle Obama has been being thrown around a lot on the idea of her running for president. And I'll say it. If Michelle Obama ran for president, I would 1,000% support Michelle. I love Michelle Obama. I think the person she is great. But I don't see why she would have any interest in coming back in the political life after spending 8 years in the White House, having her family highly scrutinized, having to live through that. I just don't know why she would ever come back and do that.
Which is exactly the point I was about to make. Normal, capable people would not want to. Who would want to run for president? You have to be a very specific person to want to run for president and be scrutinized in that way. You have to be very ambitious. You have to be, quite honestly, pretty arrogant, I think, in some ways, to believe that you're that one. You have to be super tough. And so we have individuals who can be leaders who probably do a great job, but they have no interest in the process. And candidly, having gone through a much smaller process, for a leadership position on a local level, it's a turnoff, man. It is a turnoff to be a leader because the rigor with which you have to go through that has nothing to do with the job that you want to do.
That's the point.
Is a turnoff.
That brings us back full circle to the idea that even in the process of getting a job, the idea of standards it's not that. It's about so many other things. But I think we talked about this last week. Buffalo is in a place where leadership is changing. We're getting more young leaders in there, and I'm super excited about what the political change that's taking place in Buffalo. That's taking place. I'm excited to see how it turns out. I'm excited to see how our Common Council does. How our school board does. How everybody who's been putting those rules. I'm excited to see how they do. And I'm interested to see the slate that they've been given and what they put on that slate. But again, we super thankful. We're super excited. Shout out to Dr. Doyle, who continues to be a good example. Shout out to Joe. Shout out to my father, we won't see him next week. He'll be back the week after that. And we close every week by saying, power to the parents.